Thank you everyone for coming out this evening. My name is, I might stand up just quickly. My name is Devon Zimmerman. I am the Curator of Modern and Contemporary Art here at the Economic Museum of American Art. And I am just overjoyed to be joined this evening by Gisela McDaniel, whose show ININA we are currently all sitting within. Gisela and I first met in a studio visit a little over 2.5 years ago, almost now, and to see it come into fruition has been incredible. This show would not be possible without a number of generous supporters, including Otine and Tom Cote, Tom Keys and Keith Fox, Pam and Bill Sawyer, Leslie and Michael Weissman, Matthew Golan, and the Woodard Pomeroy Trust. So thank you to all of them who supported bringing Gisela's work to Maine. And I also want to introduce Gisela, whose show I have just been overjoyed and had the privilege of kind of working and collaborating on. Gisela is a diasporic Indigenous Chamorro artist who explores the effects of trauma, displacement, and colonization through portraiture and oral histories. Her distinctive approach to portraiture has set her practice apart among her contemporaries, which has garnered distinction as a Forbes 30 Under 30 and recently Art Mag's 30 Under 30 Artists Working Today. Her work has been shown widely, including the 2025 Hawaii Triennial, the ICA Boston, the MFA Boston, ICA Miami, Baltimore Museum of Art, the Frye Art Museum, the Kunsthalle Dusseldorf, and Philharmonia in London, among many others. Her work is also in the permanent collection of many of these institutions I just listed, as well as the New Orleans Museum of Art, Hudson Valley MoCA, and Perez Art Museum, to name but a few. Please give a round of applause for Gisela if they draw it.
Thank you for having me.
You're
so beautiful.
It's been such a pleasure because this show really does survey the last almost nearly 6 years of your practice. And I wanted to start this evening somewhat chronologically to kind of begin at the beginning. We have 2 works from 2019, Lola and Empower. And could you speak to kind of where this project began, how it began with that series of work, and how you came to kind of portraiture as a practice?
Yeah, absolutely. So I went to undergrad at the University of Michigan and studied art and design. So it was very interdisciplinary, but I've always been more drawn to painting, printmaking, and I really fell in love with oil portraiture at school. And shortly after finishing my degree, I moved to Detroit, Michigan, where I started the project where you see those 2019 portraits. So I had an experience with, sexual and domestic violence that I was looking for healing from, and my process with healing was kind of to draw myself, but also to have conversations with other women and share stories and kind of talk about how we are caring for ourselves and what healing looked like, and not necessarily talking about violence, but talking about how things affect you long term and how you carry it in your body and how you walk down the street and how you keep yourself safe. So I was having those conversations, and in exchange for a conversation, I would do a figure drawing of somebody and just gift it to them because I was doing that for me. And it felt it helped me reclaim my autonomy. So it was something I felt like I could share with people, and I had done a lot of figure painting in school. So when I moved to Detroit, I didn't really know many people, and I would go to events, and if I felt comfortable with somebody, I would just be like, hey, I'm working on this project, and if this resonates with you, give me a call. And at the same time, I had joined an intersectional feminist collective, so I kind of was integrating into the community, especially the arts community, and I slowly started letting those drawings become paintings, and they got larger. And the very first one I did was a self-portrait, and I put this mask on because I was kind of grappling with the idea of safety and how to tell your story, and also maybe remain anonymous, but also how do you tell a story that may have happened in that place, or how do you protect yourself? So when I started recording these stories, I would alter everybody's voices, and I would weave all of the audios together, so really focusing on moments where people were expressing the same feeling, like, oh, this made me feel sad or this affected me in this way, and not necessarily focusing on violence. So in Detroit, the body of work was really focused on that, and I did that for about 2 to 3 years. So the 2 paintings in the other room, you'll see they have a full mask on them because all of that work was anonymous, because I was talking about stories about Detroit and showing them in Detroit. So it was important to keep people safe. Since then, and the textures actually, it's a hybrid of like a Korean sheet mask, because we would often these conversations would happen in living rooms and dining rooms and bedrooms and very intimate domestic spaces, and we do self-care things. So we do face masks and drink tea and just chat. But I was also taking this texture from a ski mask, which is more of a mask you wear to conceal your identity, right? So it was a hybrid between healing and preserving your identity. So I kind of made the mask up in a lot of ways. So when the work started showing internationally, I realized it was important for people to recognize themselves. And I think portraiture is history. It's been a part of our history, the world's history, for a long time. And thinking about, as an artist, to be able to choose who's remembered, it's a privilege. So I think the masks started to fade. So you'll see the lines on all the faces in the room, and it's kind of remnants of thinking about adorning faces as protection. So the audio and the storytelling and that portion of my body of work started in Detroit. I still do those interviews to this day, but not all of the work you see is a story necessarily about domestic violence. So I think after I was working in Detroit for a while, I was able to start selling paintings, and I was able to afford to go to Guam for the first time. And I had a professor in undergrad compare my work to Gauguin's work, and was saying, oh, the palette's similar, the subject matter. And I remember hearing my mother talk about Gauguin when I was a child, and being we don't really like him, right? So I think I took that comment to heart and was kind of thinking about this palette that, I mean, a lot of the paintings are quite beautiful, but it doesn't feel like it necessarily belongs to him. So kind of reclaiming that palette. I mean, if you go to an island, especially in the Pacific and Micronesia specifically, it's so colorful. It's just part of your world, and I think that's why I use so many bright colors. I mean, a lot of my palette is very specific, especially the underpainting. So the early works I was only doing the underpaintings in red, pink, or yellow, thinking about bodies. So you'll see that a lot of the paintings are thick because I was putting speakers in the paintings. I wanted the voice to be in the painting. I wanted people to be able to speak for themselves wherever they went. And so I was trying to make this thing that's inherently an object into a person. They're all relationships to me. They're all really lovely people that helped me heal and helped me learn and taught me about how you survive this world that we're all surviving. So kind of thinking about documenting this type of knowledge that you wouldn't necessarily learn in school. It's kind of like life knowledge, right? And thinking about those gifts of somebody protecting you with their knowledge and passing that along, and thinking about little girls. And a lot of the times we share our harder stories are to help somebody else. And that's where the practice started. And then I was able to go to Guam for the first time, and I really fell in love with being there. I think I grew up, my mother is a sociologist, so I kind of was always influenced by her process, and it really became my process as well. And I can get into the importance of starting with the interview. I think that's my first layer. I'm sorry, I'm ranting. I'm not letting you talk. But I think about the first layer of my paintings as the moment I'm sitting in space with a sitter. And the last layer of the painting is the audio in a space. So it's kind of the sandwich. I'm thinking about all of them as relationships. And I think relationships in portraiture, a lot of the times when you see women and femmes in paintings, you don't know who they are, and you don't know if they liked their portrait, and you don't know their story. So since the Detroit work, I think I've really been focusing on making sure people stay with stories that they want to tell and that they want to be remembered with. So a lot of the audio you'll hear is, their choice of story. I'm also ending a lot of most of the interviews I end with, what does a safe world look like to you? And it doesn't have to be realistic. So that can look like a lot of different answers. And then putting like 30 of those answers together has been really beautiful. I kind of consider it like emotional research in a way. But
well, from start to finish, maybe in the middle too, is in your practice, your work is not just paint on a surface in conversation very literally with audio, but it's also embedded with a myriad of objects. Could you talk about how that practice of gifting and exchanging objects kind of began in this process? Because I look at a work like Lola, and it is kind of adorned with pieces of jewelry and other materials, and even soil mixed in with the paint and kind of the floor. Could you talk about that sort of material exploration and gift-giving component to the practice as well?
I think being Chamorro, gift-giving is a really big part of our culture, and for the work, I was thinking about artifact and what would a consensual artifact look like. So everybody who sits, for me it's optional, but they're able to gift objects to the painting. So some people give me nothing, some people give me all kinds of things, and I really emphasize on maybe worn objects or things that spend a lot of time with you that have story. So, for example, with Lola, at the time I was collecting a lot of jewelry, like my own, and a lot of people would give me earrings. So you think about, you lose one of your earrings and it's sitting there and you can't wear it. It's just and so I was getting a lot of singular earrings, and past subjects or subject collaborators would drop off jewelry for the next person, and I thought it was this really beautiful act of solidarity, of kind of paying it forward and helping. I was kind of thinking about them as objects or like armor to protect the canvas. It's like another layer, and there's the mask, and there's all these layers between the viewer and the person. So in Lola, there's a diamond earring, it's a diamond baby earring from one of the first paintings I did in Detroit that somebody who didn't even know her gave for the painting, and I just thought that was such a lovely kind of Easter egg in the work. And then there's all these, I think, for example, looking around the room, like a painting of my friend's mother, there's jewelry from her daughter in the painting. This painting of my cousins, they actually have their teeth in there, and thinking about Guam, a lot of our artifacts were made from bone, so it's kind of paying homage to that. But all of the rest is like their own jewelry, so it's things that have spent time with them, and kind of these stories that they're also able to choose if they want to explain the object. So they're also able to be painted with things that are significant, so they don't have to give me everything. They can be, like, for example, when I've done some self-portraits, there's an ashtray my tata gave me that I've painted myself with. There's like a figurine that's Santa Maria Kamalan, who's the patron saint of Guam, that I've painted myself with. So there's these objects that might signify family members or people you want to keep with you, or the story again that you want to be remembered with. So I've really kind of coined this term of a consensual artifact, because I think thinking about artifact in a way that's something that's contributed and you choose that this is what you want to be remembered with, rather than a stolen object, which is mostly the story, right? And then I think this friend of mine, Kara, it's like her grandmother's t-shirt. A lot of the recording was about her grandmother. It was just a really beautiful story. So kind of thinking about these worn histories, it's really gorgeous. Like that. She made all this jewelry and these clothing items were designed by this sitter. So a lot of the objects tell their stories as well.
It's one of the amazing things that really has kind of come seeing all of this work together is the scope of the community that is kind of both chosen and self-made, but also, participated in with all of your subject collaborators. Could you talk a little bit, because both of the adjoining rooms are not just of Detroit, but of sitters in New York and other locales, about that process of kind of building community and expanding that community through beginning with works like created for such a time as this to some of the works in this gallery as well, and how has that process been for you to kind of grow and find and kind of interact with new people and build these relationships?
Yeah, I think there's so many connections in the stories, like globally. I think you can really go anywhere in the world and talk about violence against women and its relevant story, unfortunately. So a lot of the stories, a big topic is missing and murdered Indigenous women, and I started having those conversations in Detroit before I even went to Guam. And just thinking about those statistics and how awful they are, and being able to really humanize those stories and talk about the nuisances of it, and just like what it's like to experience that. Another one of the questions I ask people is, how do you carry yourself down the street, or how does your story affect the way you walk through the world? And you can answer that in a lot of ways, like how do you show up in institutions, how do you show up at your job, how do you show up to yourself, how do you show up to your family? And people are able to answer and skip whatever they want. So thinking about the overlaps between communities, and I've also had shows, it was more during COVID, but I had all this work in the studio in Detroit, and it was all about to leave, and I asked the gallery if I could have a private show just for the sitters before they left, and it was such a beautiful night because we listened to the audio together, and I think the art world is a funny place sometimes, and it's lovely to share the work and the stories with the world, but it's kind of scary. And it was so lovely to have this room where everybody kind of got to dress up and see their painting and celebrate. I think a lot of the topics we're talking about are a little bit heavy, but ultimately it's celebratory. I'm painting people I love and see myself in, and who have taught me incredible lessons in my life. So to be able to celebrate them ultimately, again, that's why like the mask has faded away. And I'm also working from photographs, so my process really looks like we'll have a chat, and then I'll take photos, and they're able to choose whether they're clothed or nude, or whether parts of their clothing are becoming negative space, so they can censor themselves, and they select the photo, so they have full control, and then they're able to edit the audio as well. So it's, I think, making sure people have autonomy throughout the whole process is really important, because ultimately I just really want people to like their paintings. I think, when somebody takes a photo of you and you're like, oh, I don't like that, now it's on the internet forever. Like, it's a painting, it's gonna be on a wall forever. So to make sure, that's the most pressure I feel. Like, it's not to please anybody else, but to make sure somebody feels seen, I think is really important. And I think oil portraiture is kind of like an elevated type of image in a lot of ways. So to put a lot of love and care into it is a really important part of my practice. And that's why you'll see a lot of like the sparkles and like these flowers, and this idea of adornment is really important to me.
I mean, these galleries are glittering with everything that's embedded into the surfaces. We're sitting among all these incredible paintings that are kind of inspired by folks working, doing activist work, thinkers, cultural leaders from Guam, friends, family members. Could you talk about kind of your first trip to Guam and what that experience was like, and how that sort of spurred this new kind of body of work, or at least an extension of the body of work that you were doing?
Yeah, I mean, my first trip to Guam really kind of blew my mind. I was really close to my grandparents, and I had always heard about Guam and kind of longed for this place and this landscape. I think if you look at the early works from Detroit, I was like making people put all their houseplants together, like for the picture. We'd like drag everything around, and it was kind of like yearning for this landscape. And once I was there, I was really lucky to, like have family connect me with local artists and local activists and really start to like delve into that world. And I was introduced to my friend Kara right here, who is an incredible filmmaker and activist and does a lot of water protection and has an incredible kids nonprofit for education. So she was the first person who kind of took me on a hike and taught me how to enter the jungle. You're supposed to ask permission to go in because we believe our like ancient ancestors live in there, and if you disrespect them, there's repercussions. And so it's called the Tautomona. So learning about our like ancient history and really seeing what life on Guam is like and kind of the daily struggles of people who are really fighting for the land. I think there's so many similarities between how we treat women's bodies and nature. And Guam is very like visually colonized. If you're there, like we don't have any birds because the US military brought a snake that killed all the birds. They're just starting to come back, but if you look in the sky, which is kind of an example in that painting, there you'll always see the bomber jets. Oh, they're always practicing flying. They're really loud. I had a friend describe it as it sounds like they're ripping the sky open. So they took our birds away and they replaced it with these like violent birds, right? These violent metal birds, and there's these beautiful butterflies there as well, like everywhere. And so you see that, and you see the tourism, and you see like a lot of the northern part of the island is just military base now, and there's a machine gun range over the aquifer, which provides the island with all of the fresh water. So a lot of people protest that, and a lot of people on Guam have just grown up in activism because they're fighting for their resources. And like Kara's a mother, most of the activists I know are mothers. So when I first went there, I really was interviewing mothers and activists and healers. A really good friend of mine is also practicing plant medicine with our Zuamtis, which is our traditional plant medicine knowledge holders. So I've had the pleasure to spend a lot of time watching them make medicine and go into the jungle and harvest this very non-Western form of healing. So I think there's a lot of overlaps between the activist community and the healing, and I think when you're in an activist space, you need to take care of yourself because it's really heavy work. A lot of them have real jobs, and it's like a whole secondary job. I think there was in Kara's audio, she's talking about Paget, which is a really beautiful hike in Guam. And she was talking about how it was really special to her, and her whole family would go every Sunday, and they decided to put the firing range there. And they had to go through this like 10,000 page text to fight this. And they're usually like 500 pages. And local community members went through that file and were able to, on like I forget why exactly, it was like the military could have looked into other land, and they got them on that, and then they sent it to somewhere else on the island. So it was kind of like a win in one way, but it just moved it somewhere else. So they're able to save Paget, and then it went to Retidian, which is the big movement now. So listening to and recording these stories of kind of this labor and this fight for the land, but also how it affects people. And water, I think water resonates with everybody in the world. Water is life. You can't be alive without water. We are water. And to think about all these precious spaces that are getting polluted, and also just like families' ranches, like it's like your farm you grew up on, and they just take it from you. It's sad, and it's like a lot of in Guam, a lot of your ancestors are buried on your land, and there's all these ancient remains, and them being unearthed is very upsetting. So I think documenting this, because it's happening in real time, is really important, and it feels similar to the Detroit works in a lot of ways, because it's this kind of violation of Mother Nature, or this body. Yeah, so I think, I guess to jump, we can go back, but in the newer work, there's only one of the paintings about this net. My favorite folklore story on Guam is, or one of my favorite, is called the Big Fish story, and it explains why Guam is so skinny in the middle. And it's this story about how there was a giant parrotfish, and every day it was like eating the island, and it was getting smaller and smaller, and everybody was like, the men would go out on canoes every day and try to kill the fish, and every day they would fail and they'd come home. And the women were washing their hair in the ocean with lemon peels, and they realized the fish was going under the island because the peels from one village went to the one on the other side. And the women collectively decided to cut their long, beautiful hair and make this magical net, and they caught the fish and they saved the island. So it's a story about how the women saved the island, everybody was able to eat, and I've been using this kind of motif of net also, and thinking about this net that connects all of these stories, and how safety, a lot of the times when you tell your story alone, it can be scary, but when you tell it in a group and you create this net, it strengthens the narrative and it holds everything together. I think another really important aspect is to talk about talk story, which is a Pacific practice, which is, in a lot of ways, it's like gossip. It's like your aunties talking at the dining room table about, like, oh, did you hear this? And but a lot of that knowledge is important. So I think a lot of the time I am recording talk story. It's like the stories you have with your girlfriends late at night, and recording that is really precious. I think relationships between women are really special, and it's such a important part of life. You like need that. So a lot of the work is about that.
There's this kind of relationality to everything, and as you talk about both your own advocacy and the advocacy for kind of environmental justice on the island by many of the people you portray, one of the things, especially in the work in this space, but it's with the extension of kind of natural plants, elements, house plants to the jungle itself, in these almost exist as figures, active, they're animated. They're not just sort of innate objects that we live with or have possession of, but have their own agency. From the forest in the background of this painting that's glimmering and glittering with real butterfly wings embedded with resin, to the way you captured water in equanimity, to the jungle almost coming alive, and I guess you said burying its teeth with the quills or spines of a pufferfish. Could you talk about how the natural world is almost like an auxiliary or secondary or part of a figure in these portraits as well, and what that experience of kind of painting it is like?
Yeah, absolutely. I think thinking about figuration and painting, especially like a female body or a femme body, it always felt like more of an experience to me. Like I know what it feels like to exist as a woman, and it feels more like a flow, because it's not something I'm looking at and just trying to depict. It's like kind of like something I can feel, right? But I think about the jungle, and it's also something I can feel. It's this really sacred space for us. So not necessarily needing to paint it realistically, of giving it this depth and this autonomy and letting it speak for itself, letting it move and letting it breathe. And I think the land has a lot of stories it holds and has to tell too. So I really like to treat the environment and let it flow more like it is a body, I think. If the jungle could talk, I wonder what it would say. But
you brought it into your work as well. Could you talk about the theme at the end over there, and its kind of incorporation of soil from Guam, and that as kind of a practice in your work too?
Yeah. Absolutely. So this is a newer painting I did the last time I was on Guam in January this year. And I actually took the canvas. This is the first time I painted on Guam, really, and I don't know if you could call it exactly painting, but I took it down to Teninga Falls in the southern part of Guam, and I carried the canvas on like a 3-mile hike, and I actually set it down right where this painting was taken, like to the right-hand side of this image, and I mixed the clay and the soil with coconut oil, and I painted the surface. And I wanted, so if you look at the back side of this canvas, it's actually also covered in dirt. That was an accident, but it was really windy on the way back, so I was like walking with all this like material, and it was like flapping around, and thinking about the story that the soil holds as well. I think seeing this show, I realized I've been incorporating soil in my work this whole time. A lot of the times I would take these indoor and domestic spaces and put a soil ground on it. And in Detroit, I actually would like collect soil, and I think there's 2 paintings of 2 of my dear friends who are sisters from Guam, but I met in New York, and I did the paintings in Detroit. But there's this like really thick soil from Detroit in the paintings, and then all the newer work that's 2024, 2025, the soil's from Guam. So kind of there's kind of these elements of almost like DNA to the land that is embedded in the work. Like the land is actually in the work. And I think at first I was just painting it, and then I started actually like, oh, why don't I actually just put real soil in here or mix it with paint? And yeah, so bringing that home was amazing. I also like smuggled a bunch of dirt home from Guam. They don't see it if you put it in your makeup bag because it looks like powder. If you need to do that at all. But yeah, so like this idea of land, I mean, all the shells in this portrait too are this is like my really dear friend Vanessa on Guam. She's the one who works with the Zuamdi, the healer, so she's an apprentice healer. And so she like mails me flowers and shells from Guam all the time. It's always the best package. So I think a lot of, island girls, especially if you go to my house, there's like shells on every surface. So they're very, very precious to me. So thinking about a lot of these shells that just exist on Guam and having them in the work. Also this painting of Kara, there's these wild orchids from the jungle, and I think they're not native, but they only grow one at a time, so you'll walk through the jungle and all of a sudden you see this pop of purple, and I would put them in my sketchbook. That's another way you can sneak things back from the Pacific. So they're flat, and then I would preserve them in resin. So thinking about these stories of place that like you can like track this flower back to a certain place or this shell back to a certain beach. Is a whole nother story as well. Thinking about the teeth, and you could definitely track that back to a person, right? And yeah, I think my friend gave me her old Amy Winehouse lighter in the other room, and thinking about the moment she spent with that until it was empty, and she wanted to keep it because she liked the lighter. And to be able to have that, you don't have a lighter, you're like, oh, it's gonna end up in a museum one day. But it's really fun to see what people give me. People have given me rocks, people have given me hair, people have given me all kinds of things. And then a lot of the newer work, I'm trying to incorporate more Pacific objects. So obviously I love shells, but I'm using like the pufferfish spikes in this painting on the back, this back corner, and thinking about it is really influenced by the Kiribati armor that they used to make out of pufferfish skin. I thought it was really amazing, and I wanted to give the jungle teeth and think about protecting the jungle. There's actually our Mariana's bat, which the Chamorro word is banihi, and it just went extinct just on Guam, so I also put that in there. So there's all these like little moments. I think the work's really hard to photograph because there's all these like micro moments, and there's these micro stories, and I'm really glad you can see them in person because you can really have fun like trying to find these like Easter eggs of stories within the paintings. But also had a painting. I've had a few works that people have been like, oh, I want to include this in the painting, but I don't want to tell anybody about it. I don't want to explain it. And it's for me. It's for me, and it's for my family, and it's for the people who know what this means. And I think that's really beautiful too. I think indigenous communities, there's a lot of ways that, like just like thinking about sage and how that was commodified. A lot of our knowledge is really precious, so choosing what to keep and what to share. I think the way Chamorros and a lot of indigenous cultures treat the land and think about it as an ancestor and think about it as a relationship and care for it is something that should be shared, and is really important to our relationship with the earth and taking care and kind of slowing down and thinking about climate change and climate disaster and how a lot of islands are going to be affected first. So it's such a shame, and I have so many amazing friends doing climate justice work. So to record them talking about their work, and I think about the audio also as an opportunity for me to put a voice in a room that is somebody two people who would have maybe never met ever. So thinking about moving stories around, of like bringing Chamorro stories to London or bringing them here to Maine is really incredible. And I love this connection to the ocean too. It feels like they're at home. And I told a bunch of friends on Guam, I'm like, oh, you're looking at the water, you're in good hands, and it's really special to us. So yeah, all over the place.
No, I mean, again, I feel like something that I continually sit with and have been overjoyed actually having the work here, because you're right, they don't photograph, they don't have this kind of imagistic quality. They are things in space, and they ask time. They ask time because they're three-dimensional. They ask time because they're tactile. They're corporeal. They ask you to relate to them as a person, as a body, to another body, which is something incredibly beautiful and poetic about it. And they're filled with care. I mean, you can't make these objects, images, without the level of care that you do. And maybe even ending a conversation both lighthearted but also about care is how you finish many of the fingernails with kind of beads or decorations and other adornment, which I feel like is such a small gesture to care. Could you talk about that?
I love that question. Thank you. I think manicures and taking care of yourself is like a really fun part of being feminine. And I mean, I usually have my nails done, but don't look at them right now. It's such like a little thing that really elevates your mood and like is something that you have to take time to do and take care of yourself. I think about my grandmother and a lot of Chamorro grandmothers. There's a word called dudus, and it means like you're kind of being extra and you like make sure you put your lipstick on every day. And I love that about Chamorro women, and I love that was passed down to me. And I think like making sure all the details, again, like I want my friends to really like their painting, so making sure their nails are done is important. I think my tata would always take my nana to get her hair done like every week, and like thinking about that, it feels like that. I also had my friend who, she's also doing a lot of artifact work on Guam, and she was talking about cleaning the artifacts and like preserving them, and she said it felt like taking care of an ancestor. And we have Lottie stones, which is what the chief houses used to be on. So there's these giant like carved amazing stones, and she was cleaning one up that was moved from the hotels, like all the tourism industry. A lot of ancient burial sites were unearthed, and she was talking about it. She was using tweezers to take all this moss out. She actually gave me the moss, which I'm really excited about. But she was talking about it like she felt like she was like tweezing the eyebrows of her elder. I just thought that was really sweet. So it's just like the details of like how you take care of yourself. And I think there's those beautiful moments of where you slow down and make sure like your eyelashes are on and you have like the little things that are maybe moments that you do for yourself and like celebrating that, and if I can do that for somebody else. I think a lot of the things, like to be an artist, you kind of grapple with like, okay, yeah, I like to make images, I like to draw, I love to be at a museum, but what am I gonna say? And I think that kind of found me, and to make sure that there's these elements of like beauty that art doesn't have to be about beauty, but I think my friends and my family and everybody I learned from are so beautiful to sort of make sure that really shines, and to take it down to the details is really fun for me. It's like I love doing the nails. It's like one of my favorite parts, and it's like, oh, what color should I do? And it's like, what would this person want? Or even like calling them and be like, what color do you want your nails? It's just fun, yeah.
Well, maybe on that point of care and making sure that we all get our nails done, maybe a round of applause for Gisela, and we'll open up for questions.
Thank you.
Anyone out there? I'm also, just as an aside, we did have a conversation as to whether or not the Amy Winehouse lighter had lighter fluid in it.
I think it's pretty much empty.
Okay.
That's what I was told, so I can't promise you.
Yes.
I'm curious, your representation here where she's hollow in the middle, is she on her way to healing, but she still feels slightly transparent?
Yeah, so that's one of the options I give people, is whether their clothing can become negative space. So I think that's just an area of her body that she chose to withhold from the viewer. So that's just hers, right? So that was her choice. I do love the way it just becomes the chair, and yeah, it's not for everybody. So like withholding parts of yourself. Thank you.
I think that's like so cool and so unusual. I don't think I've ever seen anything like that where you integrate the chair into a body. But do you work on multiple paintings at the same time?
Yeah, it's usually about like 5 at once, and I just rotate around the room, like making myself dizzy. It's like medium. You make it work. Would you say it's big? Yeah.
I've seen smaller, but I've seen bigger.
Yeah.
It's an okay sized New York studio.
Yeah,
Right?
I had a massive studio in Detroit. It was probably like these 2 rooms, and now I'm like from this bar of the stairs. Like it's like kind of like a bowling alley, but I'm making it work. Do I sign them? Yes, I signed them on the back. I think there's one, the oldest work in the whole show, this Lola, like before you go outside, is signed on the side, and then I changed it, so it's kind of a artifact.
Yeah, Margaret.
Can you talk a little bit more about the audio? I'm really intrigued about that. And you mentioned that sometimes you take different stories and put them together.
Yeah, so most of the paintings have their own audio that's just the people in the painting talking, so it's a little more linear and straightforward. And when I have like a body of work I'm showing, I'll weave all the stories together. So thinking about the indigenous practice of weaving and kind of taking it in a contemporary sense and putting it on a computer and like taking these voices and weaving them. And kind of letting the stories hold each other. So the sculpture in the corner here has about like 21 audio pieces in there, and it's about 30 different voices from 6 years. So it's kind of, again, like kind of what we were talking about, of all of the communities coming together. They hold each other. So the audio's incredibly important to me. I think spent a lot of time in museums and feeling like a lot of the women were silenced, and I just wanted people to speak for themselves. I used to do motion sensor paintings, which I'm gonna bring back, but the whole idea was that if you wanna come in the personal space of the person, you have to listen to them. And if you don't wanna listen to them, you can like respectfully stand a little further away. So kind of trying to play with this, how you're able to interact with the work.
Yeah.
I love your heart palette. What artist influenced you the most in your beginning?
Oh my gosh. You know, it's funny, I used to really love Peter Doige. I think it was just like the boats and like the wateriness. I think my taste has changed, definitely. I'm still excited to see his work. But thinking about like Michelin Thomas and all of these people who were depicting women in a very empowering way. Yeah, I really love Nikki de St. Paul because I saw a retrospective of her in Copenhagen years ago, and it starts off really, really dark, like on a really dark note, and you see her body of work get really joyful over her life, and I just loved that idea of like, you kind of watched her work through things, and it just got lighter and happier, and there's like these big, like luscious figures dancing in a garden. It's just so fun, and I loved the hopefulness it made me feel, and I was really influenced by that, of like balancing the dark and the light, and finding, like, letting the light take over. Thank you.
Oh, yep, over there.
Hi. I'm so impressed by your art and your paintings, but I'm also very impressed by the way you speak about politics and colonization and intersectionality. So how did you come to that knowledge? Did you have a minor, women and gender studies in college, or I'm just curious about that.
I think I was just raised by a sociologist. I think she's right there. And she's always had very strong opinions, and I was always like really aware that I was Chamorro, and so it was always important to me to fight for people and make sure, like, protect people around me, and that was just values instilled to me by my family, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, one more.
I just, a little bit more of a comment. I just want to say that the drawing and the paintings and figures is just gorgeous, really beautiful. And the portraits are so compelling, the faces. I've been sitting here looking at these faces, and it's like I can just, there's a strength of them that really does come through.
Thank you. No, I appreciate it. Thank you so much. I think the work's so collaborative. So I think about, again, going back to gift giving. People are gifting me their stories, and they're gifting me their images, and I think it's a big deal. So I try to take care of it.
Well, on that note, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Gisela.
Thank you.